Hello and welcome to Why Wait Till Sunday. I'm your host Alfred, and I'm getting back to some lists here as we go through the off season that highlight guys you're going to want to have on your radar for both C2C, also any kind of deep Devy, and it even gives you an idea if you're playing Dynasty of names to know for future classes. So, we've gone over the top 10 players at all the major offensive skill positions heading into each class, heading into this next season. And so now what I want to do is start breaking down some other categories, if you will, of players who I think are a tremendous value for one reason or another. And the first one we're going to do today is 5 guys who I consider are sneaky candidates to be early declares, heading into the NFL draft. And one guy like that this year is Diamie Brown, who I really liked heading into his junior year after what he did as a sophomore. And now he is one of my favorite receivers in this class, honestly, and still is not getting a whole lot of buzz. But he left after 3 years. And obviously, the assumption there is that the NFL told him something, appealing enough to say, yeah, I'm going to not play with Sam Howell for my final year. Not challenge, for an ACC title in my senior year. But my draft capital is going to be so good, I want to make the leap to the NFL. Now, of course, there are many reasons that guys can choose to stay or go. But being an early declare, among all the other things that Diamie Brown has accomplished in his college career, puts him on a great track for success. And I really, really like Diamie Brown. But this is about future guys. So this list, guys in the mold of a Diamie Brown that right now you could see them drafted. Of course, they're going to be drafted in C2C leagues. But in Devy, these guys are probably not rostered. And I think you could take a swing at the end of most Devy drafts, unless it's very, very deep. But, if you're talking your standard 5-round Devy draft, even maybe up to a 10-round Devy draft, some of these guys this year are certainly not going into this year, I don't think are going to be rostered and may not even be picked in a shallow Devy draft. You can get them with your last pick in the last round of the Devy portion. A couple of guys at the end of this list, my number one ranked guy probably would be, you'd need to pick him, maybe not wait till the very last pick. But anyway, these guys are going fairly overlooked, definitely in Devy. And you want to be holding this ticket when they pop. I mean, if you got Diamie Brown as the last pick in your Devy draft last year, you're feeling pretty good right now that he's going to head and probably be a day 2 pick and is looking pretty good. I mean, with a pick that was a high risk pick in Devy in your last round to get immediate returns like that, now Diamie heads to the NFL is pretty nice. So this group of 5 is certainly all that type of player in my mind. And we start with number 5, Dante Wright, wide receiver, Colorado State. A lot of these guys are going to have weird seasons coming off in 2020, but because of what they've already done and what they could do as juniors in 2021, I think they're on track to go early, and Wright is no exception. He has achieved all the market share things that you want from his true freshman season, where he got 20% of weighted dominator, which is kind of the minimum that you want to consider a breakout. Weighted dominator takes receiving yards and receiving touchdowns into account, with weighting yards at 80% and touchdowns only at 20%. So a lot more emphasis on the yard production with a little bit given to touchdowns. And what you're looking for is at least 20% of the team's output going to the player in question. You really want to see 30% eventually in his college career, preferably before his 3rd season. And Wright certainly did that in a shortened COVID season, 3-game season. He hit 30% as a sophomore. Granted, it was 3 games, but he did average, I believe it was like 115 total yards per game. He had well over 300 yards receiving in those 3 games. And so, yes, it was a small sample, but he was dominant. I mean, he did everything you want him to do. Smaller guy, he's 5'9" and 180 pounds from the state of Florida, which I'm coming to realize that if you want to, place your bets on a lower ranked breakout receiver, take a guy from the state of Florida. I will be putting out data later this year, but basically from all the first-year breakout type receivers, the state of Florida, regardless of star rating, regardless of conference, the state of Florida produced almost 25% of all freshman breakout receivers over a sample from 2006 to 2020. 14-year sample. There were 49 receivers that qualified in the FBS, and 11 of them were from Florida, going to all schools all over the country. But, high school receivers from the state of Florida seem to do pretty darn well. The next closest state only could claim 5 natives from their state. So you're talking about the state of Florida producing early and good receivers who break out early. Dante Wright is no exception, and he did that, and he's looking really good heading into this next year. If Colorado State has a decent season, he does 30% target share again, or market share again, with that weighted dominator. I feel pretty good. He's also returned punts and seen 26 carries over his first 15 games in his college career. So they're getting him the ball in multiple ways. You love to see that. He had 800 yards receiving in his freshman season. Like I said, only 300 yards last year, but that was only in 3 games. So feel pretty good about that. He's got 77 receptions in 15 career games. He's really a vacuum for targets. He's also returned punts. He's just a do-it-all guy for not a Power 5 team, but a, Colorado State, who I believe is in the Mountain West, which is a pretty decent group of 5 team, group of 5 conference. And so Dante Wright certainly tracking, and he's a guy you can get extremely late. I mean, I think I'm in a college-only draft, and he even fell to the 6th round or something like that. So, for C2C and Devy, Devy, this is a guy you could get at the very end of a Devy draft, and maybe even is destined to be a rookie pick, to be honest with you, because he plays in the G5. So I don't even know if he'll be rostered on the Devy side, but definitely a name to keep in mind. And 5'9", 180 is small-ish, but, we are not freaking out about weight and size that much anymore. Devonta Smith is 170 pounds verbally, not even guaranteed on the scale. So, and he'll be a first-round pick. Mohammed Brown was 165 pounds, first-round pick. So draft capital shouldn't matter too much, but 5'9", 180 is, that BMI is fine. He's small, but not, or he's short, but not small. That classic type guy. Dante Wright. And the final thing I'll say is just on tape, I did look at him. The deep speed looks legitimate. If he gets going and can get into a straight line open field, he does have pretty good long speed, probably, low 4.5s, maybe even 4.4, pushing 4.4. So the long speed is good. If he gets wide open in a straight line, he can do it. One thing I would say, I wasn't terribly impressed with kind of short area quickness, shiftiness, change of direction, that sort of thing, which at a guy at his size, you'd kind of prefer the ability to make people miss instead of just having to outrun them, which is more what he can do. So I think there's a little bit of a limit there. I don't see him much as a slot receiver. That doesn't seem to really be his game, that short area quickness. And so it may be that the size doesn't quite fit his gifting. We'll see, but he's certainly made the most of his opportunity and demanded a lot of opportunity at an early age for Colorado State. So that is my nutshell film review of him, but certainly a very interesting player. And at his, you're not going to have to put any kind of draft capital into him and see what happens. Number 4 is Wandel Robinson. Guess we'll call him a wide receiver, and transferred to Kentucky. So he played his first 2 years at Nebraska. Now he's going to be heading to Kentucky in the SEC. So we love to see that. He's 5'11", 185 pounds. And I actually forgot he had transferred to Kentucky until I kind of started preparing this piece. And I said, wow, he was kind of interesting already. But now if he does anything like what he had previously done at Nebraska, but in the SEC, we're talking about a really big rise in his perceived talent and ability. And Kentucky's putting together a pretty interesting little team there. They have Wandel, they have Josh Ali, who's pretty good. Christopher Rodriguez is an interesting running back, kind of a two-down grinder, but he's got some skills. And we'll see what happens at quarterback for them this year. They've got some transfers and redshirt freshmen who might be interesting. But Wanda Robinson is kind of your cliche Swiss Army knife. He started his career, like I said, at Nebraska, but he's had 225 touches over his first 2 seasons, averaging about 5 receptions per game and 7 carries per game. So by no means any kind of bell cow in the backfield, 7 carries, but plus 5 receptions, so almost 12 touches a game. And just there are games where he's been used as a bell cow running back when their injuries have happened, but he's definitely more of a receiver. 91 receptions through 18 career games, and he's used as a multi-dimensional type guy. His sophomore weighted dominator puts him in elite territory, just under 30% of the Huskers' receiving production. So he's listed as a wide receiver. He was listed as a wide receiver on the Kentucky website. I just checked before doing this. So, he is a receiver, but certainly multidimensional. I kind of think he's like Percy Harvin potential, and his early college use mirrors almost exactly the volume and the dispersion of touches the way the Gators used for Harvin. And I will say Harvin was kind of more efficient with his touches, but he was also on a much better team. Those Gator teams, won championships. Nebraska is not doing that at all. But they have similar build, almost to the pound and inch on height, and they both show strength on the ground despite, not being big guys, but they have a lot of play strength. They are tough. I think if he continues to be used in this way and shows success for Kentucky, you're looking at a guy who could have a big time rise because of the SEC, the exposure he's going to get this year playing in the East. He's going to have some marquee games. He's going to have some big television games. And I think he could, Percy Harvin was a first round pick. Do I think that's going to happen to Robinson? No, but could he be a day 2 pick? Absolutely, he could be a day 2 pick. He's got some really nice moves, almost the inverse of what I described with Dante Wright, where Robinson may not have that 4.4 long speed, but short area quickness is outstanding. He is a guy you could line up in the slot and he would just tear it up in space, get him the ball with a little room to work. He can make a guy miss. He can get accelerate and add yards after the catch. So, and line up, a little bit in the backfield. I mean, the guy averaged over 5 yards per carry on the ground for Nebraska in 2020. He's certainly an interesting guy, and Harvin had some success in the NFL. He's going to need, classic guy like we've talked about with Rondale Moore, with a guy like Robinson, and even a guy like Harvin. You're going to need an offensive coordinator who can, be creative in how they use him. Don't pigeonhole him into one thing, but he is a playmaker. 5'11", 185, big enough. That's what Harvin was, almost exactly. And so he puts on a little more weight. He tests well. This is a guy who we could be really excited about by next season, and you hopefully will already have him on your Devy rosters or your C2C rosters at a pretty inexpensive ADP. Donovan Knight. This is a guy I want to see get a workload, and we might see it in 2021. He's a running back out of NC State. He's 5'11", 210 pounds, so very nice size for that, kind of right on that border of really possible bell cow. I'm sure he could easily add 5 pounds before the combine, be 5'11", 215. That's going to be just fine. So he does project as a workhorse. And we may see another late career runner kind of blow up from a North Carolina university, just like Javonte Williams did as his 3rd season for the Tar Heels saw his stock go crazy up. He's going to be a day 2 pick now. A lot of people are lumping him in. Some people have him as the number 1 running back in the class. I mean, some rookie rankers have him as the running back to get in this year's class. He's almost no lower than 3rd in this class now for most people. And he's a guy who was probably not rostered in a lot of C2C leagues heading into 2020. And he's probably unrostered in many Devy leagues heading into the rookie side of the draft this year. So Donovan Knight, I think, can follow a very similar trajectory. In fact, if you go to campustocanton.com, home of Why Wait Till Sunday, of course, but you go to that website, and we've got this amazing app where you can put in a player, look at multiple different advanced metrics. It charts the player on averages and of all players in the NCAA, and we'll divide it up per year out of high school. So freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, and then give you a trend line of what constitutes an RB1 at the NFL level. So how did guys perform in college that ended up being RB1s at the NFL level? And you can see where guys score over that dotted line. When you put Donovan and Javonte Williams on the same graph, Donovan Knight's trajectory is higher than Williams is at every step of the way. Freshman season, sophomore season, we do not know what Donovan Knight's junior season is going to look like yet, but so far each season he has rated higher than Williams in almost every single metric. We'll have to see if he has that giant blow-up junior season. NC State seems to really want to use two backs. They've got Ricky Person, who's coming back as a senior, who's been just woefully inefficient, really looks sluggish, does not look very good out there, but they insist on giving him carries. But Donovan Knight has outperformed him every step of the way, and now he's going to be getting to be his junior year. I don't think he's going to be able to sit on the sidelines. If they want to win games, they need to pound Donovan Knight. His nickname is Bam. You'll hear people call him Bam Knight. He runs with that sort of aggressive attitude. He does have long speed. I actually found a clip of him straight up outrunning a safety for Clemson who entered the NFL draft. I went to see what his combine measurements were, and the safety that he beat to the end zone on about a 50-yard run ran a 4.53 40. So he beat a guy who had an angle on him at a 4.53 40. Now, it's play speed. It doesn't necessarily exactly translate, but that's fast enough. You know, he wasn't playing against some G5 team. This was Clemson. This was a drafted safety who I think got drafted in the 4th round, and he beats him on a long run, gets into the end zone. The guy clips his heels at the very end, but he's already in the end zone, and there was about a 50-yard run. So, you know, Donovan Knight has enough long speed. I tweeted the other day, I think Donovan Knight might be a faster Javonte Williams. He runs with that sort of aggressive, punishing attitude, but he is faster and has similar hands, been a member of the passing game in a similar way as Williams. I really like Donovan Knight, and the fact that he's been splitting carries, I'm a big believer in, you want market share, you want all that in the backfield to project yourself to a stud NFL running back. But he's done it, as a junior or as a freshman and sophomore, even though he's split time, he has gone above and beyond the average. And so we will see that the bar is higher as a junior. He needs to do even more, but he is hitting those marks, whereas Javonte Williams really did not hit any of those marks until his junior year. So Donovan's tracking on a better trajectory. And again, a guy you can just grab probably at the end of your Devy drafts and see that stock just rise. Really like Donovan Knight. The film matches the production, but it's being a little bit depreciated in value because of that timeshare. He doesn't have all the stats for NC State. Number 2 is Zay Flowers, a receiver out of Boston College. And we're starting to get Zay Flowers and the next guy, might be drafted in some shallower Devy leagues, potentially. I don't know if Zay Flowers would be. He probably would need to be at least a 7-round Devy draft. He's 5'11", 178 listed. He is another receiver from the state of Florida, 3-star, who goes somewhere else and really just bursts onto the scene early in his career, which you love to see. But these Florida receivers, again, are just doing work everywhere they go. And he went up to Boston. And his season in 2020, which Boston College got to play a pretty full season, 56 for 892 and 9. Also 11 rushes for 41 yards and a touchdown. Used in a lot of different ways. And he is nifty. I'll tell you, he catches the ball and is always looking to make something happen. He's skipping around. He's trying to make guys miss. He's got good body control. He does have yards after catch ability. And he had 30% of weighted dominator in 2020 as a true sophomore. The only 3 other players in the NCAA who did that as sophomores in 2020 are consensus top 5 receivers in Devy. That's David Bell, Garrett Wilson, and Treylon Burks. Zay Flowers matched them, and yet he is getting no love. No love at all, relatively speaking. Maybe because it's Boston College. I mean, that is just, they're never associated with passing or receiving. It's always the big punishing running back that comes out of there, maybe a tight end, defense. But Zay Flowers is legit. You watch his tape and he looks great too. I mean, he's making moves. He's catching long balls. He's getting behind the defense. I really like him. The more I look at it as I was preparing for this program, he should be ranked a lot higher. And even in my own ranks, I'm going to be moving him up this week, actually, in my campus rankings on campus2canton.com. He should be above Drake London. He should be above some guys. I mean, like I said, his company last year is David Bell, Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks, and yet he's kind of an afterthought. I mean, he's after the 2022s. He's after probably a couple 23s. And I bet you in C2C drafts, he's being drafted behind some 2024s, even like maybe Ja'Cory Brooks, some of the higher end incoming freshmen. And that should not be the case. I mean, I think you could argue he is the wide receiver 4 in 2022 right now, because it does drop off, and I think you're grasping at straws behind the big 3 or 4. I think he should be behind, Boutte, and maybe Marvin Mims. I think he should be closer to like Jordan Addison when you're grouping all the receivers together, and he's being drafted way behind that. So there's a value here. He's not completely unknown. Don't get me wrong, but I think he's still being valued pretty low. And I'll be honest, even in my own drafts, I've had a chance to take him in some of these mocks that we're doing in the offseason, and I'm a little sheepish before really looking into it and comparing him to some of the other players in 2020. And now I'm going to need to be more bullish. I need to get Zay Flowers on my teams and go ahead and pull that lever sooner. I've tried to wait and then missed out, but no more. That's not going to happen. He's going into his second year with QB Phil Jurkovec, who transferred from Notre Dame, and offensive coordinator Frank Cignetti. Both of them should ensure that this continues the trajectory that we're on. And then I wouldn't be surprised if he left early. I mean, I don't know. There's not a lot you can do in Boston College. Historically, I think if he does this again next year, has the market share he needs, and puts those highlights on tape, I mean, I don't see why he wouldn't be an early declare. And then you're really talking about a nice potential in the NFL. And finally, my number 1 of these 5 guys who could be sneaky early declares. And I'll be honest, I don't know how sneaky it is, but I think people are still not quite in on Kevin Harris. And the reason being, Marshawn Lloyd, who was a very big time recruit, still lurks waiting in the wings. He blew out his ACL in pre-game as an early, or pre-spring practice as an early enrollee. And, well, I take that back. I guess I'm not sure if he was early enrollee, but it was preseason practice. It was camp, and he tore his ACL. And South Carolina backfield looked like it was a total disaster. I mean, going into it was going to be all Lloyd. Everyone was banking on it. And most people outside of Columbia, South Carolina, probably couldn't name another back on their depth chart. But Kevin Harris actually had been pretty good as a true freshman before his own injury, putting up 21, 179, and 4, averaging about 8 yards per carry. Granted, a lot of that did come in mop-up duty. I think it was against like Western Carolina. I mean, kind of an FCS team, and he had a couple really long runs against them. But nonetheless, getting on the field, scoring 4 times as a true freshman, for an SEC team is certainly something. He was on my radar a little bit, especially when Marshawn Lloyd went down. I kind of was like, well, let me go dig into this South Carolina backfield, and I was hesitant because he was a 3-star, and guys that are that big and they're 3-stars, they frequently just don't have the speed, because if they were that big and had speed, they would have been higher on the recruiting lists. So I was pretty hesitant, but definitely wanted to circle that name because he did have some production. He obviously wasn't a slug averaging 8 yards per carry as a true freshman, and he's kind of that bowling ball. But he's not Benny Snell. I mean, he really isn't. He's much more slippery. He's got a little wiggle. Guys just bounce off him. I don't think that he's your standard run into the back of the lineman and hope for 2 or 3 yards. I mean, he makes moves. He can slip past, accelerate past guys. Now, his long speed, he did have a couple 80 yards run this year, but I think in general, that long speed's a little lacking. But short area speed, quick burst, he's got burst. I mean, I've seen him run, slip by linebackers that should be closing in, and he just gets past them, and then the safety will catch him or whatever. But he's got burst to break off 5 to 8 yard chunks at a time. He did do this in the SEC again. His sophomore season was really outstanding. 185 carries in 10 games, so 18.5 carries per game, 1138 yards, 6.2 clip, 15 touchdowns in 10 games, also 21 receptions for 159 yards. So he had 20.6 touches in 10 games. That's over 20 yards a game, 20 touches a game. That is bell cow stuff. Was active in the passing game, over 2 receptions per game, 16 total touchdowns. I don't know what else you could ask. I know he was a low-rated recruit. He went to South Carolina. No one's super excited about South Carolina, but he was, without hyperbole, he was incredible. I mean, he started off like gangbusters, but it kept going all season long. He was fantastic. At least watch the highlights if you can't get into the all-22 and all that. He does stuff at 225 pounds that, bad backs at 225, slow backs at 225 cannot do. He looks good. He looks bouncy and springy. He does not look like a slow Benny Snell. In fact, I went back and looked at 100-meter times. Benny Snell has a 100-meter time. His best in high school was 11.95. Kevin Harris's best 100-meter time was 11.5, a full half second faster. He is not Benny Snell. I think, well, that was my kind of assumption. Like this big, lumbering, break tackle type back for a lower tier SEC team, he's just Benny Snell again. I don't think that's the case. He's got more juice. And even Benny Snell was drafted with reasonable draft capital onto the Steelers, and people have kind of been buzzing about him at different points in his career. Now, I don't think he's really going to do much at this point, but he has been an asset, at least that you could trade once he even got to the NFL. I think Kevin Harris is much better. And so he is a bit of an afterthought in drafts right now because everyone says, well, Marshawn Lloyd's going to come back. I don't even know if that's the case. Marshawn Lloyd tore his ACL, and even right now in spring, he's practicing off to the side. He is doing the indoor activities. He's not out, doing it. And if you're South Carolina, at the very worst, you do a split backfield. And if Harris is efficient again, he's got the sophomore season on tape. And if he's efficient again, even a split workload, and then he says, screw it, I'm going to go to the NFL because Lloyd might be 100% by 2022. Just go to the NFL, Kevin Harris. And I think he should have day 2 capital if he is that efficient, even if he shares time in 2021. If Lloyd doesn't come all the way back and Kevin Harris has another season even close to this, 80% of this, he's going to go to the NFL. He's going to be a day 2 pick. And then you're looking at a prototypical size. You're looking at legitimate receiving production, and all the market share kind of stuff. I mean, he's going to have everything checked. If he leaves early for the NFL, he's going to have every box checked. And you really got to forget about that recruiting ranking at that point. As a sophomore, he had the second highest dominator of a Power 5 conference running back in 2020. The only guy who had a higher dominator rating was Mohammed Ibrahim, who was a senior, a 4th-year player who's coming back because he doesn't really have the athletic attributes and didn't really blow up till his senior year. Harris did this as a true sophomore. He had a better dominator rating than everyone's, running back 1 and 2, mine included, Breece Hall and Isaiah Spiller. And those guys are impressive. They had better freshman seasons because Kevin Harris really didn't do anything. They were higher rated recruits, and they're playing for, well, Spiller's playing for a better team. Breece Hall's not even necessarily playing for a better team and playing in a worse conference. And Harris was sensational. He was excellent. And he's got long carries on his resume. He is not just 2 yards, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. He also saw 12% of his receiving market share for the team, which is excellent for a running back. At least 10% really shows that you can be an asset in the passing game. He's got 12% in 2020. I really like Kevin Harris. What can I say? I've got him ranked kind of high. And again, taking my own medicine like Zay Flowers, I have been a little hesitant to go ahead and pick him. But I'm going to stop doing that after digging in a little more. I mean, he was so good. And I don't care about Marshawn Lloyd coming off an ACL. I mean, we should not be that scared of Marshawn Lloyd. He may have a good season. He may, end up being great in his college career. But for 2021, I don't think I'm that worried about Marshawn Lloyd. So really excited about Kevin Harris. I'm going to start drafting him more. To put it into context, I do think Hall and Spiller should rightfully be ranked ahead of him. He should probably be the RB3 right now in the 2021 running back class, or 2022 running back class, assuming he'll leave early. As far as 2023 guys, I mean, there's a big group of players there that are very, very nice. I mean, top 3 easily is going to be Bijan and Gibbs and Tank Bigsby. And then you have a couple others. Milton's in there. But he can slot in as overall Devy. I mean, he's a top 10 overall Devy running back. I'm not always seeing him drafted that way. And I think if you were aggressive, you could bump him up to like RB7, maybe RB6 in all of Devy. I don't have him quite there just yet, but I think there's an argument for that. We really have to get away from he was only a 3-star. His track time says that he's got legitimate, FBS speed and maybe even NFL speed. I mean, if he shaves a little time off there, he was 11.59. If he could shave a little more time, which a lot of guys do, there's tons of evidence that guys who run 4.7s in high school on their recruiting profile, go run 4.4s, at the NFL Combine. So with the proper training, the proper technique, he could get down into a mid 4.5s, high 4.5s, even low 4.6s, but I'd love to see 4.5. I do care about 40 time more for a running back than I do a wide receiver. But if he comes in at 225, 230 pounds and can even flirt with 4.6, which I think is possible, I think is very possible, you're looking at a really nice prospect along with the production that he's done. I'm just going to check right now again here. My running back rankings, I have him overall, Devy. Let's see. I've got him at 12. I really think I need to bump him up. Actually, I think I updated last night. It's not quite on the site yet. It's got to go through some formatting. But I bumped him up even last night because he was at 12, but I've definitely increased him. He's going to be over McCormick, over Kyron Williams. I think I'm going to put him over Eric Gray. He probably should be, I don't know, Zachary Evans, Travion Henderson is where it gets, that's kind of the bar. Jace McClellan. So I think probably he's going to land around 7, 8, 9 for me. I think he's a top 10 Devy running back, and he's just not valued that way. So that is my 5 risers next year. These are all guys I think will end up being NFL early declares, or there's a very good chance they will be. And, that is the mark. Once we have the production, which all these guys have the production, and then we have the early declare, now you start talking about a very good prospect for fantasy purposes in Devy and Dynasty leagues. So keep an eye on all these players. To recap, that's Dante Wright for Colorado State, Wandel Robinson now at Kentucky, Donovan Knight at NC State, Kevin Harris at Zay Flowers at Boston College, and Kevin Harris, running back, South Carolina. So thanks for tuning in to Why Wait Till Sunday. Don't forget to check out campustocanton.com. Like and subscribe to this podcast if you caught it and you're not already doing so. We really appreciate the love. And you can find me at AlfredJF on Twitter, and I will see you all later.